Hello, everyone. Welcome to this EuroTech University's 10th anniversary event, Key Enabling Technologies at the Centre of Europe's Future Prosperity. My name is 𝗖𝗿𝗄𝗆, and I'm pleased to be the moderator of today's event. As well as being a former BBC World News presenter, my background is science and health journalism. And in fact, 20 years ago or more, I was reporting on stories from around the world on something called artificial intelligence and covering artificial intelligence prototypes, animal imitating robots, voice and facial recognition systems, all in their infancy, which are now in common use today. And little did I think at the time that those technologies might be driving the fourth industrial revolution, and with the potential to transform the way we live and we work. And also little did I think that I would be facilitating a discussion like this today, sitting in my home, but talking to leading experts and also decision makers. Just a month ago, the European Commission published the first legal framework on AI in the world, and that was to guarantee the fundamental rights of people and businesses while strengthening AI uptake, investment, and innovation across the EU. Now, AI is, of course, just one key enabling technology, but the move highlights the very ethical and quite difficult considerations that underpin the numerous questions about how we're going to make sure we've got the right skills to give Europe's KETs a competitive advantage. So we would like this session to be as interactive as possible. So we'd like you to send in your questions via Slido, which I'm sure you've seen the details of, and the hashtag is EuroKETs. And when you do send a question in, or even if you don't, if you see those questions coming up on your feed, you can like them if you like them. So the most popular ones will go to the top, and we'll try and make sure we put them to our eminent speakers today. So please, I want to make it as interactive as possible. And just to make sure that you're setting up in your au fait with Slido, I'm going to ask you some questions now. So if we can go to the Slido, and are you a policymaker? Are you from research or academia? Are you from industry or from a non-governmental organization? Are you from civil society or somewhere else? Are you from another? So just those questions again. Are you a policymaker? Are you from research or academia? Are you from industry? Are you from an NGO, civil society, or another? And while we wait for those results to come in, I just want to say that we really value your input today. So do take part in the discussion. And are we in a position to see the results? Yes? I can't see them, so you can see them. Perhaps Tatiana, when you start your speech, you could perhaps tell me the result of the poll. So I would like to welcome Tatiana Pantelli, Head of EuroTech, Brussels office, for some introductory remarks.
Thank you very much, Anya. So we have majority of our participants today from academia or with research backgrounds. And the second biggest group is policymakers, which is not surprising, of course, for the Brussels audience.
Okay, welcome to everybody, and over to you now, Tatiana.
Thank you very much, and thank you for participating in this poll. So, ladies and gentlemen, just imagine a life without key enabling technologies. There would be no computers, no mobile phones, no cameras, no electric cars, no lighting, of course, or no energy efficient housing, or no renewable energy. There are no doubts that KETs are at the heart of innovation, and of course, they're in the hearts of our lives. They enable many products and drive the development of entirely new industries. but the new technologies cannot be developed and brought to the markets if the workforce does not possess the necessary skills. The rapidly growing markets in CAD-related sectors require an increasing number of professionals at all levels and in different disciplines. This has been indicated and reinforced many times. By the high-level group on CAD in 2013, which has recommended that the European Commission, member states, and regions address the current CAD skills deficit in a comprehensive and integrated manner across all technical levels in all different CAD domains. Also by the leading figures from the European research and technology organizations in July 2019 at the workshop Future Technology for Prosperity, the leaders have agreed that the creation of highly skilled jobs, the establishment of robust innovation ecosystems, and sustainable value chains are particularly important to ensuring scale up in Europe. I hope that you all agree with me that training and education is crucial to train the next generation of scientists and the upskilling and reskilling of those who are currently active. And of course, with today's societal, cultural, economic, and environmental challenges, not only the natural sciences and STEM subjects should be included in the creation of the new solutions, but also the social sciences, humanities, and the arts and design are required. There is also a responsibility of industry here, especially on the discussion of ethical aspects and customer acceptance of the new technologies that must be integrated earlier. We know all this, but do we act on it? At EuroTech, CADs is a critical part of our work at all levels. They're included in 2 of our 5 strategic focus areas. It's of course not forgotten by our European University project, which is the engineering university. The importance of this topic for us is also well demonstrated by this event, which is part of EuroTech University's Alliance 10-year anniversary. Yes, we're 10 years old this year, or 10 years young, I would say. A lot has been done during these last 10 years, but we certainly see a mountain of important, exciting, and challenging tasks in front of us. So imagine the world without CAD. Imagine your life without CADs. And if CADs are so important to all of us, if they're so important to Europe's future prosperity, what do we need to do to equip our researchers, our students, and our workforce with the right skills to make Europe competitive? Will we answer this question today? Well, I certainly hope so. We have an excellent panel of experts in additive manufacturing and AI from the EuroTech universities, policymakers at the national and European levels, and industry who can help us to answer these and other CADs and skills-related questions. We also very keen to hear from all of you, our participants, our guests. Please be active, be challenging, ask questions, and propose solutions. And with this, I would like to pass mic to Anya, our moderator, who will lead you through this discussion. Very welcome to the EuroTech Universities Alliance event.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. And yes, we do take a lot of those technologies for granted today, but we do need the skills to try and make sure that they really do progress. And of course, that's one thing we will be discussing in our panel. I just wanted to involve the audience once more just before we start our panel discussion. And I want to just sample what you think, and I have another question for you. So we're going to have a word cloud, and I'm sure you know what those are. And in 2 words, if you can just choose 2 words, how do we make Europe a world leader in key enabling technologies? So if you go to the next poll on your Slido, just choose 2 words. How do we make Europe a world leader in key enabling technologies? Now, while you're doing that, I'm going to introduce our panel. So we're going to be looking at the role universities have to play in helping drive that innovation. And we have 5 speakers who are going to discuss with your input. So I'd like to introduce 𝗵𝗻𝗂, who is Professor for Materials Engineering and Additive Manufacturing, Technical University of Munich. And he's also chair of the EuroTech focus area of additive manufacturing. We have Carlo van der Weyer, who's General Manager of Eindhoven AI Systems Institute, Eindhoven University of Technology, and he's Chair of EuroTech Focus Area Artificial Intelligence for Engineering Systems. We're also joined by Tomasz Skordas, Acting Deputy Director General from DG Connect at the European Commission, 𝗖𝗿𝗿𝗍𝗂, Deputy General Secretary, Industrial, European Trade Union, and Herbert Seissel, Deputy Director General, Technology-Oriented Research for Innovation at the Federal Ministry of Education and Research in Germany. So let's just see if your results of your poll have come in. So can we just go over to see if the word cloud is there? And some of the answers are coming up now. And I hope our panelists can all see the poll. I can't see the results yet. They're still coming in. While they are coming in, I would just like to ask there they are, I can see them now, large R&D investments and cooperation. So those are obviously some of the right answers that are coming up. There's right skills, and there's also lots of other ideas such as connect, strategic planning, autonomy, funding, excellence, disruption of expectations, getting the policies right, sustainability, education. But yeah, the big ones are right skills, strategic planning, cooperation, and of course, large R&D investment. So welcome to all the panel. And just to kick off our discussion, I just wanted to ask you that same question. Perhaps you agree, or perhaps you don't agree. So how do we make Europe a world leader in those technologies? So I would just like to start with you, 𝗵𝗻𝗂. Just perhaps you'd like to reflect on what we've seen on screen, and perhaps do you have a couple of other words to add to that collection?
Yeah, thank you, Anja, and a warm welcome to all the listeners. Greetings from Munich in Germany. So I think Europe is already one of the leaders in key enabling technologies. So if we look at manufacturing, the European industry has set worldwide standards in terms of productivity, but also in terms of quality. So with a focus on Germany, the trademarks made in Germany or German engineering, they are known worldwide, and they are proof of high quality, reliability, but also trustworthiness. And they are significant for most advanced technologies. So what do we need for this? We need highly trained individuals, and we have an environment here in Europe that also takes care of their employees, of its workforce. I think that is different to many other regions of the world. And even though we have high salaries and industry has to invest a lot of money, we are still competitive. And for example, if you think of German cars, they are a symbol of power, of safety, of quality, and almost 900,000 people are working here in Germany related to the car industry. They have well-paid jobs, and about 400 billion euro of revenue is generated in the car industry. 2/3 is coming from from export. So this is also a sign of high quality and of success. The competition is high, and if you ask me why is Europe competitive, I think it's innovation. And innovation is not driven by machines, it's driven by the people. And that, in my opinion, starts already very early. So in the primary school, when I have a look at my little kid, it's amazing what they have to learn in primary school and how fast they have to learn. And then your education continues and goes on for years. And if you decide to go to university, you have already a good degree of education, but then it continues for many more years. And I can say, if you complete your studies, you have a very have received a very well-balanced training. You have managed to organize your studies, so you have the right skills to join the workforce and to provide the next steps, to provide the innovation for the next key enabling technologies. So I think the role of universities in general is to be one step ahead, to think of the next technologies that come up, to try to research, to investigate them, and to see which are the future key enabling technologies to maintain the high quality of life in Europe.
Thank you very much. You say Europe is ahead in key enabling technologies, and from your point of view, we are very ahead as well in education, and everything seems fine. It's perhaps not something I've heard from other people who've said that there's a lack in the education in STEM subjects, for instance, but we can have that discussion later. Perhaps 𝗪𝗿 𝗪𝗿, do you agree that with this optimistic picture?
Yeah, I do agree with most of it. Of course, we don't want to sit back in old ageness and just enjoy the fantastic position that we have. We have to keep on investing it, of course. But Peter, of course, agree with me that as well. But it's also maybe also start with the general term of key enabling technologies. What is that? That's also something that moves. There are other technology in the future that will be key than currently, and there was also in history. But we started using technology actually in the beginning just to support the first tools were to support our hands. And then we got all kind of cars and machines to support our legs to be faster, etc. So we keep on supporting ourselves in some very good cooperation between people and machines. And at a certain moment, some decades ago, these machines also started assisting our heads, our brains. In order to be smarter, we have these computers, and now they're even starting to support our minds. That goes even beyond that, which can lead to some very dystopian future kind of scenarios. But in the end, technology always helped us to the benefit. There's always a negative side to technology. You can use bricks to build houses, but you can also smash someone's head with a brick. Now, luckily, by far, most bricks are used to build houses instead of the other side. So this is also with all technology that probably, and we should take care of it, it takes more benefit than it will cost us. But this new kind of technology that gets even more involved in our lives also comes with some new questions and challenges, but to my point of view, also with some chances for Europe. That's actually two things over there happening at this moment. If you look at this artificial intelligence, which used to be a cyber system only, where the Googles and Spotifys knows exactly what the next song or your next search will be, etc., which was of huge service. Now you see actually that this artificial intelligence, this increased exponential increasing intelligence is also starting to combine with the power of machines. So it's machines producing data, using that knowledge in order to perform even a better task, which is a total different system where, to my point of view, Europe is relatively well positioned. And you have this combination between software and machines, etc. And yes, there was a lot of German examples, but there are many other examples where we are leading. We're making the chip machines, the wafer steppers, etc. They're still European. It's such on the edge knowledge that require a total different kind of democratic kind of companies that are a lot in Europe. The other thing that's what's happening at this moment, if you would look at it very black and white, is also how we position ourselves towards the rest of the world. And again, just to put it very black and white, I know the real world is gray, but in general, in China, a lot of the progress is government steered and controlled, where in the US, most of the companies have a relatively free role in order to speed up and to innovate. Whereas in Europe, we tend to always think from the individual with our democratic value background. And I know that that's not the fastest way. If you always have to see what with privacy, what you do with data, all this kind of stuff, it might hamper a little bit the speed of innovation. But I'm really convinced that on the long term, this is going to be the most important point of view. So we should stick to these real European values, because I think certainly if technology and human get closer and closer intertwined, this will be of increased importance. And not to the least bit, and that's maybe also to close my my introduction, I think that this start with your democratic values also gives the best way of the quality of living actually in Europe. That's also based on that one. So I really do think that in due course, it's also a lot of people say, well, Europe is built the museum of the world, but that's maybe also because it's so beautiful, etc. It is a high quality of living, also based on these democratic standards, which on the long term also will attract the most knowledgeable people. That's also why they stay here as well, and why they have evolved as such that they're now in Europe. So that's the strengths and the values where we should start this challenging future for it.
Thank you very much. I'd like to go to 𝗪𝗿𝗁𝗁 then. So we've heard various ideas about how Europe should stay ahead, and Europe is ahead. Do you agree? Do you think that European values are a benefit in terms of trying to push ahead with key enabling technologies and make Europe a leader in the world?
First of all, I think yes. I think the joint forces in Europe is a very good way to go on a strength side. But going back to your question, I think Peter is right that we have very good examples where in key technologies we are very excellent in the world, but not in all, and that's a problem. If you look deeper into it, you will see that in every key technology where we have evolutionary innovation schemes, where we develop on strength in the future, into the future. There we have strength and we have a good position. But if you look to those areas where you have more disruptive elements in it, then I think we lose ground compared to the world. And this has good reasons, and we have to look at that, of course. And if you look to universities, for example, I think everything is right what says. I think universities deliver us the science, the excellent science we need, and this is very, very clear. Universities deliver to us very excellent educated people, which is very important. We have to have a second source, of course, for those who are already educated and they have to learn on the long run in their work life. That's very clear, though you have an additional educational system. And this is something probably where universities can step into it as well, because there's a huge demand. So this is very, very good from that side, if I may say. But we have some negative points at the university side. First of all, I think we have a lot of silos at the universities. That means we have not so much interdisciplinary work between different disciplines. And this is something where if you look to innovation, which is not just the question to get a good and excellent scientific results, where we want to achieve something which goes into the market, you have to involve engineers, you have to involve different other disciplines within a subject. And this is something where I think universities can do better in the world, at least here in Europe. And second, I think where we still have I think a problem is in educating people to taking risk. who from a university goes into a startup? And if you look to this, the point I said earlier, if you have disruptive technologies, a lot of these disruptive technologies are solved, at least in the world, not in Europe, by startups. So I think there is at university, there's an education part which university has go much more in depth into it to create a different innovation culture, to different mindsets to the people. I think that's very important. But of course, joining forces in Europe is a very, very good idea. And I think Carlo already mentioned the 𝗪𝗲𝗿. I think the 𝗪𝗲𝗿 was a very good example where the joint forces in Europe, where different countries work together, different companies in countries work together to build up this 𝗪𝗲𝗿. I think this was a very exciting example. And also, if I look to the universities, I see a lot of improvement we can achieve if we can bring universities together to learn from each other how, for example, in Germany, how in France the educational systems is built up, what we can learn from that. I think there's a lot of things where we can go ahead, and so from that I would stop now. I have much more to say, but I think Thomas and Isabel will also say something. So please, thank you, Anja.
Thank you very much, and we will come back to you. You can say much more, and I'll also put some of your points to Peter and Carlo about the universities. So I would like to ask Isabel there. So in terms of the workforce and unions, you represent a lot of workers. What do you think is needed to make sure that key enabling technologies in Europe flourish?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting me today. So, well, I mean, for workers, it's of course, on the one hand, workers tend to be afraid of new technologies because this is frightening their job. But at the same time, they are also afraid of not getting these new technologies, because this is what, at the end of the day, will make their company future-proof and will secure employment. So what is key is, of course, to involve workers very early when new technologies are introduced, so they can embrace change. Because as some of you have already said, I mean, our asset in Europe is people. Actually, they are the one driving innovation. So, I mean, we have to make sure that people are on board, and they also have to be equipped with the right set of skills. Because, I mean, it's one thing to invest into the new technologies, but also we have to make sure that the people also get the right competence to actually make the full potential of these new technologies. So, as it was said already before, I mean, we really have to, the challenge is actually bring all the forces together. I mean, make sure that there is early anticipation and identification of skills needs to ensure that the right skills are available, and to organize adequate upskilling and reskilling. And this requires the support of all levels. It can be done at national, sectorial, regional, company level, and with the involvement of all stakeholders. I mean, this has been said: companies, social partners, technical schools, and university. And we have already some good example at EU level. Now the Pact for Skills have been launched. I mean, the idea is to link the 14 ecosystem with skills requirement, but there are also good example in our sectors. I mean, we are presenting industry, aerospace, defense, automotive. We have good example of consortium that aim at bringing together at European level companies, schools, university, to identify strategic skills for the industry and define educational programs. And of course, the idea is to share, is to disseminate this knowledge, avoid that there are clusters. So, I mean, the challenge is also for us to have more cross-fertilization between companies and university and VET schools. Universities have to open up more to companies, but also companies have to be more present in university and VET schools to co-construct educational programs, sending experts as visiting professors, and to provide a better access to cutting-edge technologies. Because what we see also is that with the level of technological development is such, the technologies are so expensive that often vocational schools are not always equipped. They don't have the latest technology. So it's very important that we have this cross-fertilization, and also we see a role for companies to become more and more learning companies by facilitating continuous training. I mean, we know that the requirement to train people will be faster, and we'll have to train more people. So, I mean, we would also like to see companies providing a better access to apprentice, alternates, and also PhD students. So I will stop here, but looking forward to continue the discussion. Thank you.
Lots of ideas there, Isabel. And just before we go on to our next speaker, I just wanted to just put one thing to you. In my research for this, I came across something that Klaus Schwab, who runs Davos, has said in a book on the fourth industrial revolution. And he makes the point that in Detroit in 1990, with Silicon Valley in 2014. In 1990, the three biggest companies in Detroit had a major capitalization of $36 billion, revenues of $250 billion, and 1.2 million employees. In 2014, he says, the biggest companies in Silicon Valley, the three biggest, had a considerably higher turnover, generated roughly the same revenue, but with about 10 times fewer employees. So, Isabel, is that a worry that these technologies you've already hinted at could mean that people don't have jobs?
Well, of course, this is a worry, as I said in the beginning, but this is why actually upskilling, reskilling is so important. I mean, we see a job disappearing, we see job emerging, but what we see actually in our industries is actually jobs, most of the jobs are not becoming obsolete. They change. I mean, some skills disappear, and I mean, it's still a challenge because workers have to be equipped with a new competence. So this is really, and this is why I'm saying probably the big difference is that the challenge for us is to train more and people faster, actually. So this is why we have, and it's not a surprise that a few weeks ago, in Porto, the socials, at the social summit, the EU has set itself this objective of training people more and to train 60% of adults by the Horizon 2030. So this is seen as a major challenge, because what we have to make sure is, of course, these development, they benefits everyone, and that no one is left behind. So this is a very big challenge, especially at the European level, because we see also, especially with digitization, the risk of potential digital divide.
Thank you very much, Isabel. So let's go now to 𝗖𝗵cie𝗺 welcome. So the viewers or the audience were suggesting that we need much more R&D investment, we need better cooperation. Our speakers have also talked about working together, and we need a lot of upskilling. What do you think we need, and what are we doing?
Good afternoon to all the panel. To colleagues, but also to our listeners. It's a pleasure to be here. I think a lot has already been said, so I would like to take a slightly different angle. Let me highlight a few things. Indeed, you said that our listeners have highlighted a number of areas which are absolutely essential for KETs, for Europe to be in the leading seat. And some of our panelists have already said that some of the fundamentals here are indeed joint investments, joint initiatives, strategic planning, strategic teaming up, I would say, but also ecosystems and value chains. But also, let me say, it's also about green. And more we see that two of the major dimensions and priorities that we have in the future for Europe for the next 10 years is the green and the digital dimension. These are absolutely fundamental also for the KETs. And I would add to those, not only education, skilling, upskilling, reskilling, and all the rest, but I would also add the fact that we need also advanced infrastructures and access to those infrastructures. And that we need always to have in mind multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary aspects, which are related, of course, to STEMs and skills. But we also need to make sure that when we go in Europe and we invest, we have always in mind that the difference that we have in Europe is coming from our values. Sometimes we are coming a little bit later than the others, but our values, our ethical aspects, our people-centered approach to developing technologies like KETs, and the green dimension, the digital dimension should be our leading factors for the future. I can easily extend on all those factors, of course, but it will take me quite a lot of time. Let me stop here, and I'm pretty sure that several of those dimensions, we can take them up and develop them further in the next few minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we continue the discussion, there are questions coming in, so I would just like to ask the panel one of them. And we heard at the beginning that, you know, we're leaders, Europe is leading in key enabling technologies, but someone in the audience has asked about chip design and manufacturing. It seems to be a key enabling technology, but Europe is not strong. So does it matter? Would anyone care to answer that one?
Should I ask, since it was a bit
Yes.
short? Okay. So actually, this is absolutely correct. There was an analysis of that the Commission has undertaken very, very recently. It was published in the updated industrial strategy that we had early May, where we analyzed indeed in particular where are the main weaknesses from Europe perspective in the micro nano-electronics and the semiconductor industry, just to take some of the aspects that have been just mentioned. And one of the major findings is that we have very, very good assets and strong elements here. I will just make one example. Apart from our very strong research capabilities that we have in the area, we have one of the biggest companies from a capitalization perspective in Europe and worldwide, which is ASML. ASML is a company that is now having more than 250 billion of capitalization and is a pure European success story. And it's a company that is contributing with advanced chip making and equipment, and is actually with the technology and tools that they are providing, making the manufacturing capabilities of all in a worldwide perspective. So just to say, these are strong elements that we have, but we have also many weak elements. For example, in the design, we are quite weak. And we know that today we are depending on design technologies and design facilities and design tools that are major US based. So Europe has lost quite a lot of, I would say, the capacity of having fabless IP related semiconductor industries here. And we need to make a strong effort to go into this direction in the coming months and coming years. The second big element you could see easily is that Europe has lost manufacturing capabilities in chip making here. The big three chip making companies are non-European. We know them very well. We're discussing with them. Maybe some will come here for major investments, but we know that we are not there. Of course, we have very good chip manufacturers still in Europe, and we have some market leaders, but just to highlight, as our listener has said, that these are major weaknesses that we have in Europe, and we have a small market share compared with the others. Today, we have less than 10%, if I'm not wrong, and we have very clearly announced that one of the biggest objectives that we will have in the next 10 years by working all together and by making a new initiative in the semiconductor industry, we are hoping to get to the 20% of the market figures in the next 10 years. And this is part of our strategy with many countries, European countries, to rebuild the electronic and semiconductor capabilities in Europe, both from the point of view of design, research, of course, but also manufacturing capabilities. I will stop there, and I'm pretty sure my panelists here can continue.
I know 𝗪𝗿𝗁 wants to add something there. Herbert.
Yes, thank you so much. I think Thomas is very right. We have different areas. If you talk about microelectronics, we have to look into the microelectronics, what we are talking about. And if we're looking to design, it's different to the high-end microelectronics via the processors and the memories. And we have also an area of chips which are related to applications where we're pretty strong, I would say. So the whole story is very different, I think. And that's why I wanted to say something on that. I think we have a new chance now. We have a new chance because up to date, the major factor was the capital. How much capital a company has to invest in a fab for these chips, and what is the factors on different places, for example, energy costs and so on. And this changes because we have right now different additional questions to solve. One question is, of course, it's the security of these things. We have to be sure that the security is in the chip involved. And that means we have to understand the chips. We have to know how to design these chips. So we have to have a new chance in this total play to go up front now. And the second point is we learned that's very clearly during the pandemic, it's the technology sovereignty. We have to have our own value chains. That does not mean that we have to do everything ourselves, but we have to understand everything, that we can do it by ourselves if we need. And this changed the whole play again. And so I think, yes, we have to invest quite a lot in microelectronics, and we have a new chance now because also industry gets a new chance in Europe, investing in microelectronics in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to go back to Carlo and then Peter, perhaps to pick up some of those thoughts. How could universities actually help with that, with microelectronics? How can they actually, some of the things that 𝗪𝗿𝗁 had said earlier, how do they have a disconnect? How do they stop the disconnect between studying and skills and industry? So Carlo, over to you.
So very wide question, but I would like to thank Herbert for what he said, because that was spot on actually. So it's a very difficult balance of being dependent and have your own sovereignty, but also accepting that in a global system you are interdependent, which on itself is a good thing, just as long as the other is just as dependent from you than you are from the other ones, and that's what sovereignty is about. So understanding a bit is even more important maybe than also be able to produce everything and have the total value chain just in your within your own borders. And this is something that you, even if you know the production is somewhere else, the designing of the chips, of course, we have with Infineon, and closer to us, we have NXP, and of course, ASML has a lot of knowledge over there. As long as you have the biggest and the enormous important parts of this value chain, it's not on itself a problem that the piece of the value chain will also happen outside your borders, as long as there's a healthy balance between that. That also means that you will have to understand the entire value chain, and that's also where you want to build knowledge upon. And I don't think that's that bad. And I have the luxury of being from the region where both NXP and ASML are located. So our university is really trying to feed them with engineers. The problem is they ask for 100 times more maybe than we can produce. That's a bit exaggerated. But yeah, I think more and more it shows that the number of people, I think the progress of the future is not depending on the budgets, although that is a point if you want to build a fab or something, but it's not based on the budgets. It's also not limited on the technical possibilities. It's probably limited by the number of resources that you can supply in order to do all that exciting high-tech key IT of CAD stuff. So that's the thing where we work upon. which means actually in the beginning that we have to make technology more sexy to get more people to study technology, which by the way is also happening. It's more cool to study technology than it used to be. And that's all kind of stuff that we have to contribute to, which is happening, but might move a little bit faster.
Okay, thank you. Peter Meyer, what do you think of the idea of a European value chain, mainly European value chain?
Yeah, I fully agree to Carlo. And what I can add is at the universities, we are responsible to provide an excellent education to our students. So we are the enablers. And I think it's good to get these companies back to Europe and get production back to Europe. But another approach would be to create new companies. So talking about startups and the startup culture. So as I said, we should be one step ahead, and startups have the capability to produce the chips of the next generation. So if we can identify this technology, and if we support our graduates in founding startups, this will also increase the productivity in Europe. And for that, we need a change in mentality. If you fail in Europe, if your startup goes bankrupt, you have a sort of stigma. Whereas in the US, they say you learned from your failure and you will never do this failure again. So continue with the next one. So I think this is a key aspect. And then also, I think we have talked a lot about the lifelong learning. So university has to also offer courses to non-students to get them up to date, to keep them involved in technology. I think that is also a key issue to remain the wealth in Europe.
Lovely, thank you very much. And I want to put a couple of other questions now which are coming in, and Thomas Skordas, I'm going to ask these ones to you to begin with. So a couple of questions that have come in. So if one wanted to find a reasonably comprehensive list of KETs for the current age, where should they look for in such an inventory? And the second one is, will green hydrogen be an enabling technology in Europe's future? And of course, the Commission has prioritized certain key enabling technologies, but again, there's new technologies evolving all the time.
Indeed, you're absolutely right. I mean, one of the essentials here that we would need really to follow very closely is to be able to follow what would be the new trends and the new emerging issues, and to see how, with the means that we have today, we can create the key enabling technologies of the future. I have two very concrete examples to give before I come back to your question. You're right when you say key enabling technologies evolve all the time. In addition to the 6, 7 that we have today here, let's not forget that cloud and edge to the cloud are also essential technologies. Big data issues, Internet of Things, and the likes, not only artificial intelligence, are also key enabling technologies from a digital perspective. And I would also add to those the fact that we have more and more high-performance computing, which is not a new technology, but nevertheless, it is an enabling technology for many application areas. And last but not least, quantum and hydrogen. Quantum technologies for us is the technology for the next 10 years, as well as the green hydrogen. Actually, there was a whole on quantum. Herbert and I are working very closely together to be able to develop this emerging technology for the next 10 years. So maybe we can come back to that a little bit later on. On hydrogen and green hydrogen, actually, there is a whole strategy that the Commission published. So it is becoming, I would not call it a key enabling technology, but I would call it a key green enabling technology for the future, where we have still a lot of challenges to sort out, both in the production, the massive production, but also in the massive use and the massive spread and deployment of hydrogen-like technologies. So this is just to highlight that that's the only way for Europe to go ahead. When technologies become commodities, you can forget about it. We are not the cheapest in the world. So this is where we have to always look for the next generation of innovation, the next generation of technologies, and make sure that this become our key enabling technology where we can have, I would say, an advantage, a competitive advantage of developing those further. All those technologies are technologies that we are promoting. Where can you find them? There's plenty of communications and strategic papers that exist in the internet about which are the key enabling technologies in which Europe is investing in the last 2-3 years. If it's not in the last 10-15 years, I think Ms. 𝗵𝗵𝗫 mentioned before that key enabling technologies are supported by us since 2013, and it continues. And we have been always updating what key enabling technologies are to come to the situation of today. So no doubt that if you want to have a look also about these key enabling technologies, have a look also to the latest Horizon Europe program, and you will identify also a lot of those being mentioned here.
You talk about those emerging technologies there, but what should universities be doing to help boost those technologies?
That's a very good question, actually. And I think here we have two major challenges that some of those have been already highlighted by some of the speakers. We have to go, I mean, STEM is a fundamental one. So we need to start from there. Everybody knows that this is the basic knowledge we have. But then the question mark is how much specialization are we going to offer in our universities, and where should this happen? Should this happen at the level of the basic education? Should it be happen at the level of masters and PhDs, certainly masters and PhDs, or are some of those to be also seen as transversal, multidisciplinary technologies where we need to be, you know, at the front end of those developments? So this changes fundamentally the way education possibly would need to be furnished in the future. Yes, for STEMs, for sure. Yes, for creating the necessary conditions, actually, that we should also have more and more female students coming in. Today, only 1 out of 3 students are female students. This is one of the basic problems that we have in education. But then we should think really, and I think we are now in the critical phase of thinking of where the education of the future should go, how to create the transversal conditions we need to develop the engineers of the future, which are not just, you know, engineers in one specific sector, but they need to address more and more complicated and complex technology issues. And therefore, they need to get some of the basic education already within the basic education system we have today. The way to create this transdisciplinary schools of thought for the future is one of the major challenges we have for the next 10, if it's not for the next 50 years.
Thank you. And that's connected to a question that's just come in, actually. How do you build interdisciplinary knowledge for successful innovation and good technique, societal acceptance, and environmental sustainability and ethics? A lot to consider there. Isabel Barthez, I'd like to bring you in there. Do you have a comment on, we're talking about what universities should be doing, about skilling, about education, about master's degrees, etc. But what about the ordinary workforce? How are they going to keep up with all of this rapid change in the way we work?
The challenge for us is to turn training into continuous training, to make it a reality, and as I said before, to turn companies into learning companies, because it's not enough to have basic education. Of course, we see that the basic requirements are different. So we were just now talking about STEM. We also talk about coding, but we're talking more and more about social skills, ethical skills. I mean, we see engineers now that have to use AI being more and more, having more questions about how to understand the ethical principles that are behind the use of AI. but the real challenge that we see for the future is to make sure that we have a more holistic approach of the skill development from the early childhood through lifelong learning, actually. So, I mean, it's also a question of how we organize work and how we organize training in the future, that actually there is no disruption between work and training, that actually training is really embedded into work, because that's really the only way actually to keep up with technological developments. And we see already that remote e-learning, and we've seen during COVID-19 how this has also changed our approach to teaching. So this is definitely a way forward for the future, to ensure that we have a better integration of training into our working life. The time where we would go into training for a week is probably over, actually. I mean, it has to be a continuous process.
Thank you, Isabel. And Peter Meyer, you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the EuroTech University Alliance is an excellent framework for these collaborations. So I really enjoy working with my colleagues from the different universities. And I have an example from the last semester where we launched a student challenge in additive manufacturing, so my subject, and the topic was 3D printing of prosthesis by a frugal approach, so probably for countries of the global south. And students from the various universities joined. They came from various disciplines, so from engineering, but also from social science. So they investigated how a prosthesis would change the life of the people. There were business students who developed a business plan for a local industry in the global south. And the students had 2 months to work on this challenge. And I really was amazed by the results the students came up with. And from the feedback of the students, they also really enjoyed very much this collaboration with other students from other universities, from other cultures. But it was not an easy task. So how can we assure that students get credits which in their countries? It wasn't easy to get the students into our video lecture systems. So they are not our registered students. So a lot of technical details you don't think firsthand. Yeah, but that was a very good example.
Thank you. And Carlo.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank all the speakers that they understand how incredibly difficult the task of university is to prepare students for a future that's completely unknown what kind of jobs there are. Because that's actually what's happening. We cannot really tell what kind of jobs will be the differentiator in 10 or 20 years of what will be the new key enabling technologies. How can you prepare for them? I tend to compare that with if you ask a farmer of 200 years ago, and if you would tell him that in 200 years, there's only 3% of the people are farmer, whilst 200 years ago, it was maybe 70%. Then probably the farmer would have concluded that, oh, that's nice. Then we only have to work a couple of hours and we have enough food on the table. Then you have to tell him, no, there's other kind of jobs back then. Oh, what kind of jobs? And then you have to explain what a moderator is, or a professional football player, or an app developer. Even if you would explain, and that you even make more hours because we're not depending on daylight anymore. So actually the thing is that's very hard to tell. He will not understand, and he will not understand how that brings food on the table where he has a point. This is what happened in 200 years of this changes. It used to happen every century and then every decade, and it might even change every year, that we have this completely new kind of world, and we have to cope with that as universities. Now, that means actually that this preparing students for an unknown future, trying to make them implicitly flexible to know how to act with this kind of change. to give them also a broader education rather than a very one-dimensional. We tend to call it the T-shaped engineers. So you have a wide range of kind of knowledge, but you also have to have a deep dive certification in order to show that you are able to dive into the deep, which is still necessary, especially in technology development. We also tend to call it a pie-shaped engineer. So you have 2 deep dive certifications on a very broad kind of development. And that's the thing that actually happened to us. In our university, we used to have student teams, and I also had the honor to be responsible for the student teams together with some other people. But we had student teams that did all kind of competencies around the world, like we're world champion football, robot football, I must say. So we didn't manage to be the real football. That's always Germany that wins. So we gave up, and now we concentrate on robot football, and we finally world champion. These are student teams that make all kind of competences around the world, the challenges, solar cars, for instance. They learn so much on this very wide field that I do believe, actually, currently we already have 50 of these student teams, that the future of education is more like that, a very wide kind of experience where you are in technology and have to show the deep dive. And that's actually what we tend to do, and how these universities have to cope with this enormous uncertainty that we do not really know what kind of jobs we have to prepare our students for.
You make the students sound like a sort of homogenous bunch who are all the same, you know, all us engineers working together, but actually different cultures might actually get in the way or influence them.
That's a good remark. You have to prevent that. And you also have to value that some of these people are still very nerdish kind of one-dimensional people, because they can make the difference in the end. There's certainly, as ASML, a lot of people that really make the difference like that. So you have to value this changing. But as a whole, you have to make this bunch of students that can cover a lot of items, including the ones that we cannot define yet today.
𝗪𝗿𝗁, I saw you shaking your head there.
No, I absolutely agree with Carlo and also what Peter is saying. Let me highlight that from a little different angle. I think the most important thing is, because this was your question, what we can do at the universities to find the new KETs of the future. And I think most of the time you find it, whether you type deep in a subject, but even more you find in a transdisciplinary way between subjects. And exactly what Peter's saying, I think this was exactly a very good idea, a good example with the 3D manufacturing, where you need so different disciplines to bring this at the end to an innovation that shows that here we have a real chance to do difference, but their university have to change. Why you cannot graduate as a bioengineer in chemistry? Why you cannot graduate as a mechanical engineer in software if you're doing something in this area, because this is transdisciplinary. And these silos, that's what I said at the beginning of my presentation. This is still preventing new innovation coming out from the universities, and I think we have to work on that, because these are the low-hanging fruits. I'm sure they are.
Peter Meyer, what do you say to that? Universities work in silos.
First, I would like to add to Carlo's comment. I think that the university live from the diversity of their students. It would be very boring if all the students would be the same. So it is really fun to see the different people and how they approach things. And another thing that has changed in the past is the style of education. So the lecturer, the role of the lecturer is different. It becomes more like an entertainer and a trainer. If you do the conventional lecturing 90 minutes in front of the students, everyone is falling asleep. So we do a lot of hands-on courses, small groups, and that over various disciplines. And I think this ensures that we don't have these silos, because all of our courses are somehow interconnected. In engineering, we have courses in entrepreneurship, where all students benefit from this other angle, as Herbert said.
Okay, thank you. Let me just ask a couple of other questions that have come in. These will take us away from the discussions we're having because they're completely different. But one is about China. So where do you see China leading now or soon in a key enabling technology? Well, aren't they leading already? 𝗪𝗺𝗿.
It depends what you want to compare. And if you compare, for example, in some areas, patents, yes, they are leading. But when you see and you go a little bit deeper in the patent story, then you will find out that they patent 10,000 different things that we will never have thought that we will patent here in Europe. Just to give you one small example, it's more an anecdote, but what I'm trying to say is that definitely China is one of the big investors for the future. The way they are investing is massive. The way they are investing is also addressing, capitalizing on the fact that they have a very big diaspora and bringing back the diaspora now to the country. You have seen it very, very happening in many areas. So we know that they are investing massively. We know also that they will soon become one of the, and we have seen it also in some of the areas that they become now the leaders in some of the technologies. The question mark is always whether this model of developing the Chinese model is the right model. If I take an example, take the next generation of communication technologies. We saw it happening. We saw Chinese companies developing massively. And then we saw that some of these Chinese technologies, they were very well installed in Europe and bringing issues that we have now started contesting. So are we depending on the Chinese technology? Yes, we are depending to much extent. But again, when we go to see in which area should we work with them or should we not work with them, this is a fundamental question for the future. Should we work without the Chinese? I don't think so. I think we should work with them in a number of areas. We should still go and call for reciprocity in our programs in the way that have been doing here some of the Chinese companies, so that we have access for our industry also in their own markets. It's one of the biggest markets of the world. Are they going to have the only leadership in the world? I don't think so. I mean, both the US, to a large extent us, and some other, I would say, international developed countries are working on this. But it also calls for thinking a little bit about the future of partnerships. In which area should we establish partnerships in the future with some of our colleagues? This goes back to the question of our sovereignty in key enabling technologies, and back to the question about how much do we want to do ourselves? How much do we want to be depending on non-Chinese or on Chinese technology in this case? And where should we establish this kind of leadership? Geopolitics are at the very forefront. And one of the areas we will see is what will happen with the chip production, just to use one of the examples we mentioned. You may imagine that in a few years that we may have a totally different situation than what we have today, with the three companies that are there, one of which, by the way, is Taiwan. You may understand what I mean. So I think this is where we need really to be very, I would say, proactive and a little bit foresee what the future would be also from a European perspective. Yes, the Chinese will be there. Yes, there will be, they are already there in many of these key enabling technologies. And they are not only there, they are influencing also many other parts of the world with the way they're going to outside China to do massive investments here and there. So we should not be naive. I mean, Europe so far has been investing also in other parts of the world, also in key enabling technologies, but we see that they have not been investing in an intelligent way. So again, it's a matter of with who do we want to team up and how much do we want to use our capital for influencing these other parts of the world in a good way, and making sure that our industry, when they work with other industries of the world, develop also the European perspective, which is certainly not the Chinese perspective. And this is where I think we have an added value to believe that if we continue the way we've done in the last very few years, then we have a chance to not depend too much on the Chinese technologies and to build strategic partnerships of the future.
Thank you. Herbert Seisel, how should we approach China?
Thank you so much. I think China is different from that what we expect, because if you look to innovation, we said already we need people, we need a good education system, we need companies, and so on and so on. We have a lot of ingredients, they have to come together. And there's one thing which is very clear: it's not just a question of money, because this was also a point we see in the Slido point here. People ask for more money. More money is not the only ingredient to be successful. And I think, of course, China has a lot of money. They invest a lot of, but you have to have more ingredients additional to that to be innovative. And one is, of course, education. And if you look to the Chinese universities, we have excellent universities and excellent graduates from these universities. But if you look to the majority, they are much less in the quality than we have in Europe, for example. So we have always to distinguish. Or let's give you another example. You probably know that I'm also responsible in this area of HPC, high performance computing. So I visited one of the largest and best high performance computer in the world, which was Milky Way 2 in China. And I talked to them how they do that and what is their experience, because we in Germany, or we in Europe, I should say, we have a lot of requests to use these high performance computers we have in Europe, and we have a selection process where only the best can go on these computers. And I asked this professor how they do the selection process. He didn't understand me. Why not? Because they have only 20% usage of their computer. They have not to select. They took every project they can do on the computer, they can run on it. That means you see the pure investment in the computer is not in a high performance computer, gives you not the output in innovation. You have to have also the programs running, the people using this computer, to have the applications for that. So I think the whole system has to be set up, and I think China is really on the spot, and we have to see that they are very, very good, and they have a very good people, but not in the broad area. So we still have advantages. If you look, for example, in the hardware world, I think we are quite good. Peter mentioned Industry 4.0, for example. This is machinery. There we are very, very good. But if you look to the software area, China is much better than we. So we have cooperation projects together between China and Germany in the area of Industry 4.0. And if you look into the projects, what they are doing, you see always the hardware is done by German partners, and the software part is always done by Chinese one. And there's a reason for that. And I think there we have to be very careful. Yes, please, Peter, you.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. But if we just look at the human resources that are available, so China with 1.4 billion people versus 750 million people here in Europe. So just from a statistical point of view, there are a lot of highly talented people in China. And you mentioned there are excellent universities. And I think what is also a big difference is the high driving force of the Chinese students. It's unbelievable how many applications I get per day from Chinese students who want to come to TUM and study and work with our teams. I almost receive no applications from other European Union universities. Yeah, I think also here we have to be one step ahead. We have to develop new types of learning and new subjects that help us to stay ahead.
Thank you. So we've been talking about the role of Europe, the role of China, the role of universities. What I want to talk about now, just for a little bit, is about SMEs, because after all, they are the bulk of Europe's businesses. And how do we incorporate these new technologies and these new learnings in these SMEs? So 𝗖𝗿𝗶𝗷𝗿, do you have a view on that?
I think we've been talking about cooperation. I mean, a lot of people also pointed out at the importance of cooperation between universities, between technological schools, between companies. I really think that, I mean, this whole idea of cross-fertilization actually is extremely important. Also, we see more and more companies, I mean, high-tech companies that have their own universities, they have their own campus. I think we see that it's extremely important that these campuses are also open to the supply chain, to the SMEs actually, because at the end of the day, and we see that, for instance, in the aeronautics sectors, is if the SMEs do not master the technology, this is then a bottleneck for companies. So there is definitely an incentive for the OEMs, for the big companies actually, to make sure that the SMEs also acquire the cutting-edge technologies. And also in terms of training, what we see also is that these big OEMs tend to open up their apprenticeship program, for instance, to the value chain actually, so they make sure that the students acquire the most advanced skills.
Thank you. Thomas Gaudas, what kind of incentives can SMEs be given to give apprenticeships to students? Because perhaps some of them can't afford to.
Maybe before talking about apprenticeships, I would like to highlight a number of areas where we are putting in place for SMEs to be able to progress. I mean, and I'm not talking only about providing incentives like capital funding and possibilities for innovation funds and the rest. I think what is important here is to prepare the SMEs to have access to technologies that they may not access by themselves, or to have access to experimental facilities, to pilot fabrication lines and production lines that by themselves would be impossible to gain. One of the principles that we have developed in the last years is the notion of the digital innovation hubs, to create in every region of the Union digital innovation hubs, that is dedicated facilities for SMEs to have access to the latest technologies via these digital innovation hubs that will be networked at European level. And we plan to spend massive amounts of money, more than €500 million, in addition to what we've already spent, to create these innovation hubs, to create these digital innovation hubs, to create them next to universities, next to experimental facilities sometimes that are existing in advanced universities, so that they can have access to these kinds of knowledge, to skills, and to even high-performance computing that 𝗪𝗿𝗁 mentioned before, since one of the areas where we expect innovation to happen is exactly around those digital innovation hubs. In addition to those, we are promoting more and more now, for example, in the area of artificial intelligence, the creation of advanced experimental testing facilities, where again, SMEs would have access to big data that by themselves are very difficult to get in the area of artificial intelligence. And therefore, through this big data, to help SMEs develop also innovation perspectives for their business that alone will not be able to do. So these are 2 or 3 areas there where we have been taking action to accompany SMEs based on previous experience that we had, to be able therefore to advance the skills, to provide advanced skills, and to provide advanced technologies to SMEs for making it happen. Now, you can easily foresee that when we talk also about apprenticeships, etc., very often in the context of the initiatives that we are promoting, we're also promoting the mobility of students, the mobility of young engineers to participate in the research projects and research initiatives we have to go and work for SMEs. So instead of SMEs, paying for them, we could also have schemes where we come to accompany the young engineers, etc., to work in SME, to get into the environment of an SME, to understand what the problems of SMEs are, and also then to help them, possibly develop their own business later on. Why not? It's in this, by exposing, I would say, from an early point of view, these kinds of approaches and these kinds of risk-taking and to everyday business of SMEs, that we can also prepare our people to take these risks for the future. Last point also that I would like to mention, it's not only about training and apprenticeship, is also the possibility for SMEs to have access to capital. This is a fundamental issue here. Despite all the progress that we did in the Union in the last, I would say, 10 years, we're still lagging behind what the capital investments, private investments, but also public investments are in this field in Europe. We have now been putting in place more and more investment capabilities for SMEs to have access to this early investment to be able to develop further their business, in particular in the area of KETs, but not only. And this is a fundamental issue that we still need to develop all together, not only from a union perspective, but also from a member states perspective, to be able to help our SMEs, get early access to these public and private funds, equity funds or whatsoever, loans, to be able to move ahead. So these are just a kind of, I would say, an overview of the measures we are foreseeing to help SMEs moving in the right direction, including in the skills development. I don't want to talk, there's a lot of things that are being put in place also in the context of the next generation recovery funds of the EU, where we had now more than 670 billion euros that would be spent on in the next 7 years, on the next 5 years actually, by member states for recovery facilities. And a lot of the member states, if not all the member states, have foreseen that skills, strengthening the skills, providing capabilities to SMEs, to recruiting engineers, to recruiting the people that they want, upskilling, reskilling, etc., and providing training opportunities is in all SME agendas. And this is also the positive part that we have seen in all the recovery plans that we have received so far. It's more than half of those that we have received, and we still wait for the other half. But I can tell you it's extremely promising from that perspective. So just to provide also an overview of how things may move and should move in the next few years.
Thank you. That's an optimistic picture there. Would anyone else like to comment on SMEs? Because we've got about just under 10 minutes left. Carlo.
Yeah, maybe a short one, because the SMEs, of course, don't have the financial power in order to invest in fundamental research. They cannot support a PhD or something. So you have to work with voucher systems to have them at least have some kind of access to all the knowledge that's being researched. On the other hand, I also worry about their position towards the data of their products. They don't have a very strong position in order to get access to the data that involves their business. And that's an even bigger worry, maybe for the future. The thing what I see is that the combination of big corporates that do have access but are actually too slow to innovate, being actually supported by these SMEs in this combination, that's actually the way to go forward. So I think the strengths in the combination of big corporates having access to all this data and having also the means in order to invest in future research, with the SMEs that support these big companies, they float actually on these SMEs, to keep them awake, to do the innovation, apart from all their very heavy processes. So also the SMEs should not be too modest, and I do see a very, very bright future.
Thank you very much. 𝗪𝗿𝗁.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anja. I think SME is a really hot topic, and it's a topic since really 20, 30 years. I think I've seen so much programs, so much instruments we use to try to bring SMEs more in front. Of course, we still have a good example of good SMEs, but it's not enough, because they are the innovation and shock motor for us in the EUs, and we have to find how we can do it better. For example, and this is not so easy, I made you one example. You said, let's try that more students go to the SMEs we saw the SMEs cannot pay them, so we created a program that the SMEs got money for half a year, for a student from the university, that they get newest information and newest science, and they could develop something with their own product to go forward. The result was, of course, we didn't find so much young students going to the SMEs, because they were looking for job offers for longer term, not for just half a year or a year. So this is natural. So it's not, I'm not blaming them, but this shows to you that we have a lot of instruments used and a lot of good ideas, but nothing was really totally successful. Right now we are working on another instrument, and I think Thomas has already mentioned that. That is the question: can we increase the infrastructure we can provide to SMEs? For example, it was the data infrastructure. Here, 𝗖𝗿𝗄𝗋, for example, is, if I may mention that, this is an initiative from Germany. We rolled it out for Europe, where we can join forces to join our data sources also for SMEs. It started in the area of Industry 4.0. Probably Peter knows that, remember that. But that is not the only infrastructure. The next infrastructure is how can our SMEs get involved in AI, for example, in AI infrastructure, how they can approach institutes where they can solve their problems for AI. So the question is how we can build up an infrastructure supporting SMEs with their problems they have. And I think this is the point where we are staying right now. For example, in Germany, we build up these competence centers for AI, supporting, having a platform, an AI platform for the SMEs where they can put their questions on and getting probably a solution for that. And the same, for example, in EuroHPC. But all the time, if we're doing something like that, we have already the problem that we run in the problem that we get in conflict with the state aid rules, because then we support, of course, industry with public money. So, and this is a question which we have always to solve. And I tell you the truth, we have not solved, and Thomas can probably second me on that. We have not solved it with the HPC, with the high performance computer yet. So this is still a remaining problem we have. So we have still, at least from the governmental side, a lot of things to solve to help SMEs to getting more involved. But I think the infrastructure instrument is a very important one, and I'm really looking forward that we can change something with that instrument. Thank you.
We could talk about SMEs all afternoon, and there are questions coming in, but we are running out of time. So I'm afraid I'm not going to ask that question, but I'm just going to draw us to a close now with a closing thought from all of you, a quick tour de table as to what you think is the one game changer. I'm not going to say game changers. You can only have one thing which is going to unlock European skills and get KETs boosted in the European industry. So I'll start with you, Peter.
Yeah, and I will keep to my line. So I think that the key, as probably a lot of students are listening, I think you are the key to the success for the future. So your enthusiasm, your willingness to learn, to travel, and to also innovate is the future. Is responsible for a successful future.
Thank you. Isabel.
I think it's the European values that also should be reflected into skills. I mean, the ethical values, the social values, also the green values that we see now translated into a European ambition. Also, I mean, the idea that Europe can shine again. I mean, we've been talking today about strategic autonomy. So I think we have, I mean, and in a way, maybe thanks to COVID, Europe has a bright future ahead of her, and we have to join forces for that, and also, yeah, we have to change, so maybe be less naive, be also more bold, be more self-assertive about what we can do. If you look, for instance, at GDPR, I mean, this is now something which is also followed by other countries outside the EU. So I would say to the students, stay in Europe. You know, there are lots of nice prospects for jobs, and it's still a continent where we live well, actually, because I mean, we are sticking to our values.
Thank you very much. And we've got a minute left. So 𝗪𝗲𝘁𝗲𝗿, in 30 seconds, please.
Yes, I think to add on that, two things: keep on European values and increase risk-taking.
Very good. That's nice and brief. And Thomas Gordas.
Not only stay in Europe, but create in Europe the European initiatives that we want, that are ambitious, and that will make our researchers and our young students find their ambitions to stay in Europe, because we live very well in Europe, but we need also to have common and very ambitious European projects for them to stay and thrive in Europe.
And Carlo.
Yeah, I think in the future, with robots taking over all the jobs that are prescribed by rules, etc., and it's all about coloring inside the lines, I think it's even more important, or our only added value as humans, is that we can color outside the lines without things going out of the hand. And here in Europe, we're not only allowed, but we're also slightly better than average with our anarchistic mindset. So let's cherish that a little bit and continue.
Great thought to end on. And I'd like to thank all of you, the audience, for watching, and for our fantastic panelists for their really insightful interventions, and lots to think about there. So, and thank you very much to EuroTech universities. Have a good afternoon, everyone.